luxury jewelry store manager humiliates and mistreats Michelle Obama, completely unaware that Barack Obama is watching everything unfold. What happens next leaves everyone speechless. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Michelle Obama walked through the lively streets of downtown Chicago, the crisp winter air biting at her cheeks as she pulled her coat a little tighter. The city buzzed with energy, shoppers hurrying by, couples strolling hand in hand, and the warm glow of storefronts reflecting on the pavement. She smiled to herself, excitement bubbling beneath the surface. Their anniversary was just a week away, and she wanted to find something truly special for Barack. Then, she saw it. Eternal Luxe. The name shimmered in gold script above the entrance, one of the most exclusive jewelry stores in the country, whispered about among celebrities and socialites. If there was anywhere to find the perfect gift, this was it. As she approached, a uniformed doorman, stiff and expressionless, pulled the grand wooden door open for her. She nodded politely, stepping inside, immediately embraced by an atmosphere of hushed luxury. The contrast from the bustling street outside was almost jarring. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting delicate patterns on marble floors. Soft classical music played in the background, blending with the quiet murmurs of well-dressed patrons and the occasional clink of glass. Everything about this place exuded exclusivity. Michelle adjusted her scarf, her eyes scanning the dazzling displays of diamonds and gemstones. But as she wandered deeper into the store, something felt off. None of the sales associates approached her. At first, she brushed it off. They were probably busy. But as the minutes ticked by, her presence continued to go ignored. She caught glimpses of them, quick glances in her direction before turning away, smiles reserved for couples dripping in designer labels. Still, she waited. Still, no one came. Finally, she addressed a passing sales associate. "Excuse me," she said politely. The woman barely glanced at her before scanning her outfit, her simple wool coat, leather boots, a knit hat pulled low against the cold. Then, with a clipped nod, she responded, "I'll send someone over to assist you." And then, nothing. Michelle's patience wore thin. She wasn't one to demand attention, but the blatant disregard was undeniable now. Across the room, she spotted a man watching her. Tall, impeccably dressed, his slick back hair gleaming under the chandelier lights. The name tag on his suit read, Garrett Harrison, store manager. Summoning her composure, she approached. "Good evening," she said, polite but firm. "I'd like to look at one of the necklaces on display." Garrett's smile was thin, almost rehearsed. His eyes flickered to her coat, her boots, then back to her face. "Of course," he said smoothly, but his voice dripped with insincerity. "Though, I should warn you, these pieces are quite exclusive. Perhaps I can suggest something more suitable?" Michelle froze. There was no mistaking what he meant. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. His smirk widened, his tone laced with condescension. "It's just that these items are typically purchased by our high net worth clients," he continued. "I wouldn't want to waste your time on something out of reach." Michelle's jaw tightened. She had encountered subtle prejudice before, but this was something else, something intentional. Taking a slow, calming breath, she refused to let him rattle her. "I'd still like to see it," she said, unwavering. Garrett raised an eyebrow, amused by her persistence. "Very well," he said, unlocking the glass case with deliberate slowness. He lifted the diamond necklace, a breathtaking piece, elegant yet powerful, just like the woman who would wear it. But instead of handing it to her, he placed it on the counter, keeping control of the interaction. "This piece is $120,000, he said, watching her closely, waiting for her reaction. Michelle met his gaze without flinching. But what Garrett didn't know was that Barack Obama had been watching the entire time. And what happened next? It left everyone in the store stunned. The luxury jewelry store manager thought he could humiliate Michelle Obama, completely unaware that Barack Obama was watching. What happened next? No one saw it coming. Stay tuned, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Michelle Obama had faced her fair share of challenges in life, but standing inside Eternal Luxe, surrounded by glittering diamonds and velvet-lined cases, she never expected to be treated like she didn't belong. She had walked in with a simple goal, to find something special for her husband, something meaningful to celebrate their anniversary. But instead of receiving the warm service this exclusive boutique was known for, she was met with cold indifference. Sales associates ignored her, whispering amongst themselves. When she finally approached the store manager, Garrett Harrison, his smirk barely concealed the judgment in his eyes. He made it clear, this was not a place for her. Still, Michelle refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "It's lovely," she said smoothly, her voice betraying none of the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Could you tell me more about it?" Garrett hesitated for a fraction of a second before launching into a rehearsed sales pitch, detailing the rarity of the diamonds and the masterful craftsmanship. But his tone dripped with condescension, as if he was humoring her. Michelle felt the weight of the stares around her. Other customers were glancing over, some out of curiosity, others with quiet judgment. She was no longer just another shopper, she had become a spectacle. When Garrett finally finished his speech, Michelle gave him a polite nod. "I'll think about it. Thank you for your time." She turned toward the door, keeping her composure intact despite the humiliation clawing at her. But just as she reached for the handle, his voice rang out behind her. "Ma'am." The mock politeness in his tone was sharper than ever. "If I may suggest, there are more affordable options at department stores nearby. I'm sure they'd be happy to assist you." The store fell silent. Michelle turned slowly, her expression unreadable. For a moment, it felt as if the very air inside Eternal Luxe had stilled, waiting to see what she would do. "I'll keep that in mind," she said evenly, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. Then, without another glance, she stepped outside into the cold evening air. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, Barack checking in to see how her shopping trip was going. She hesitated. She didn't want to dampen his mood with what had just happened. So instead, she forced a faint smile and replied, "I'm fine. I'll tell you about it when I get home." But as she walked away, a weight settled in her chest. What should have been a joyful moment had turned into yet another reminder: prejudice doesn't disappear, even in places draped in luxury. She kept walking. Then she stopped. A park bench sat empty beneath the streetlights. Michelle sat down, staring at the boutique in the distance, its chandeliers glowing through the frosted glass. She could have left. She could have swallowed the injustice and moved on. But why should she? She had come to that store for a reason. To buy something beautiful. Something that symbolized the love and strength she and Barack had built together. And she wasn't going to let a man like Garrett Harrison take that moment from her. Her decision was made. With quiet determination, she stood, turned around, and walked back toward Eternal Luxe. Inside, nothing had changed. The air was still thick with wealth and exclusivity, the sales associates still draped in their air of quiet superiority. But Michelle had changed. Garrett was speaking with another customer now, a well-dressed older man admiring a watch. The difference in his demeanor was impossible to ignore. He was deferential, almost fawning, his voice warm and accommodating. Then he looked up, and his smile faded. "Oh, you're back," he said, his tone shifting. Annoyance crept in beneath the fake politeness. "Was there something else you needed?" Michelle met his gaze, unshaken. "Yes," she said. "I'd like to see that necklace again." Garrett hesitated. He glanced around the store, almost as if looking for an excuse to refuse her. When none came, he let out a slow breath and retrieved the necklace from the case. "This one?" he asked, holding it up. "Yes," Michelle said, her tone unwavering. She steadied the necklace carefully, letting the moment stretch, then met his eyes. "I'd like to purchase it." Garrett blinked. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. "Are you sure?" he asked, unable to hide the skepticism in his voice. "It's a significant investment." "I'm sure," Michelle said simply. His fingers twitched slightly as he started the transaction, each movement slow, deliberate, as if he was still processing what was happening. She could feel the eyes of the other sales associates on them, the tension thick in the air. When the receipt finally printed, Garrett slid it across the counter without looking at her. "I'll just need a card for the payment," he said. Then, with a smug smirk, he added, "Of course, if you'd prefer to arrange financing, we do offer that." "That won't be necessary," Michelle cut him off, handing him her card without hesitation. Silence. The smirk disappeared. Garrett processed the payment in stiff silence, each beep of the register a small victory Michelle refused to show on her face. When the final receipt printed, he handed it over, his jaw tight. "Thank you," she said smoothly, the weight of her words unmistakable. She reached for the necklace, but just as her fingers brushed the box, Garrett's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. The entire store seemed to gasp. "Wait," he said, his voice low but sharp. Michelle's gaze snapped to his, cold and unwavering. "Excuse me?" Garrett leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I need to verify something," he said, his tone laced with suspicion. "I need to confirm that this card is yours. You understand, don't you? It's store policy." Michelle stared at him. But what Garrett didn't realize, Barack Obama was watching the entire time. And what happened next left everyone in the store absolutely stunned. The luxury jewelry store manager thought he could humiliate Michelle Obama, completely unaware that Barack Obama was watching everything unfold. What happened next left the entire store in stunned silence. Stay tuned, this is a moment you won't forget. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Michelle Obama didn't flinch. She pulled her wrist free, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the humiliation and fury surging inside her. "No, I don't understand," she said, her voice rising, no longer holding back. "You've already processed my payment. What exactly are you implying?" The room froze. Customers and staff alike had turned to watch the confrontation unfold, eyes darting between Michelle and Garrett Harrison, the store manager who had made one very costly mistake. Garrett straightened, forcing a smug smile onto his face. But it wasn't confidence anymore, it was a cover-up. "I'm just doing my job," he said smoothly, as if his blatant discrimination was part of store policy. "We have to be careful with high-value transactions. I'm sure you understand." Michelle's expression hardened. "Oh, I understand perfectly." Her words sliced through the air like a blade. "You're accusing me of fraud because I don't fit your idea of what a real customer looks like." The silence in eternal lux became suffocating. Even Garrett hesitated, for the first time, looking unsure of himself. Then, in a last-ditch effort to regain control, he stepped out from behind the counter, moving in closer. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." His tone was no longer polite. Michelle stood her ground. Unmoved. Unshaken. Unbreakable. "Not without my purchase." A flicker of frustration flashed in Garrett's eyes. Then, without warning, he grabbed the necklace from the counter and shoved it back into the display case. "You're causing a scene," he snapped, his voice rising. "Leave now, or I'll call security." Michelle felt her hands tremble, not from fear, but from the sheer, burning anger at what was happening. She took a step back. Not to retreat, but to draw a line. A boundary. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice steady. "And you're going to regret treating me like this." Garrett opened his mouth to argue. And then a voice cut through the tension like a thunderclap. "What's going on here?" The air shifted. Every head turned toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway, his presence commanding, his gaze sharp as steel. Barack Obama. The soft chime of the entrance bell had faded, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. The store, the staff, the customers, everyone seemed to hold their breath. Barack's eyes scanned the scene, taking in every detail in seconds. He looked at Michelle first. She stood rigid, her chin high, her shoulders squared. But he could see it. The fire in her eyes. The anger simmering beneath her composure. The hurt. Then, he turned his attention to Garrett. The man who still stood near the display case, his hand hovering as if he could somehow take back what he'd done. Garrett's face paled under Barack's scrutiny. For the first time since the confrontation started, he looked uncertain. But still, he forced a smirk, as if trying to reclaim control. Barack stepped forward. His voice was calm. Too calm. "What's going on here?" Michelle turned toward him, relief flickering in her eyes for just a second. But she quickly steeled herself. She didn't need rescuing. And she wasn't about to let anyone, not even Barack, think she did. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said, her words clipped and deliberate. "Mr. Harrison here seems to believe I don't belong in this store." Barack's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Is that so?" Garrett, suddenly scrambling, straightened his posture and extended a hand in a fake attempt at formality. "Mr. Obama," he began, his tone oozing false politeness. "I had no idea." Barack didn't take the hand. Didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, he cut Garrett off with a look. "I don't care who you thought she was." The words hit like a hammer. "What I care about is the way you just treated my wife." The room shifted again. A ripple went through the other customers. Recognition set in. Michelle Obama wasn't just another shopper. She was the former First Lady of the United States. Garrett went ghost white. But his lips pressed into a thin line, desperately trying to salvage what little control he thought he had left. "I assure you, sir," he said quickly, "there was no ill intent. It's just store policy to verify large purchases." "Stop." Barack's voice was low, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Don't insult my intelligence." Garrett froze. "I heard you. I saw the way you spoke to her. And I know exactly what this is." Garrett opened his mouth, to deny, to make another excuse. But Barack didn't give him the chance. "You've humiliated my wife in front of your staff and customers." His voice never rose. But somehow, it felt louder than anything else in the room. "You laid hands on her." The weight of that statement hit like a thunderclap. Customers whispered. Employees shifted, uncomfortable. Even the soft classical music playing in the background seemed to fade into nothing. Garrett knew he had lost. But he had one last play. His desperation was obvious now. "I'll call security," he threatened, his voice shaking slightly. Barack took a single step closer. "Go ahead." A beat of silence. "Better yet, call the police." Garrett flinched. Barack's voice remained calm, unwavering. "Let's see how they feel about your version of events when they watch the security footage." Game over. Garrett visibly stiffened. And then, Michelle stepped forward. She placed a light hand on Barack's arm. Controlled. Poised. "I want that necklace," she said, her voice slicing through the silence. Garrett hesitated. And then Barack finished it. "And I want an apology. Right here. Right now." For the first time, Garrett Harrison looked truly afraid. The luxury jewelry store manager thought he could get away with humiliating Michelle Obama. But when Barack Obama walked in, everything changed. What happened next left the entire store in stunned silence. Stay tuned, this is a moment you won't forget. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Garrett Harrison was genuinely afraid now. The weight of public opinion was already crushing him. He could feel the stares. Hear the murmurs. This wasn't just about an unhappy customer anymore. This was about a scandal. His throat went dry. His collar felt tight. He tried to speak, but the words barely made it past his lips. I'm sorry, Garrett stammered. His voice was barely above a whisper. Michelle's sharp gaze pinned him in place. Louder. The word cut through the room like a blade. The customers, the staff, everyone was watching. Garrett swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said again, louder this time. For what? Barack pressed. Garrett's eyes darted around the store, searching for an escape. There was none. He was trapped. Finally, he looked back at Michelle, his hands clenching at his sides. I'm sorry for treating you unfairly, he said. And for doubting you. Michelle held his gaze for a long moment. Then, she nodded. Good. Now finish the transaction. Garrett's fingers trembled as he fumbled with the keys to the display case. His hand shook as he retrieved the necklace and carefully wrapped it. Michelle took the box without another word. But Barack? He wasn't finished. We're not done here, he said, pulling out his phone. Garrett's head snapped up. Panic flooded his face. What are you doing? Garrett's voice rose. Barack didn't even look at him. Calling the police. Garrett went pale. Because my wife might accept your apology, Barack continued, his tone calm, but cold, but I don't think it's enough to make up for what just happened. Michelle stepped closer, lowering her voice. Barack, no. He shook his head. This isn't about us anymore, he said firmly. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Michelle met his gaze. She saw it, the same fire, the same unshakable resolve that had carried him through every fight for justice, every battle for equality. She nodded. Garrett was sweating now. Sir, please, he begged, his voice shaky, desperate. Let's not escalate this any further. Barack's expression didn't change. You already escalated it, he said. Now we're going to make sure it's handled properly. By the time the police arrived, the story was already spreading like wildfire. Customers had taken out their phones, recording videos, snapping photos. Some had already posted online. And within minutes, the first headlines began to appear. Former First Lady Michelle Obama racially profiled in luxury jewelry store. Michelle and Barack stood side by side as they gave their statements to the officers, recounting every detail. Garrett tried to defend himself, tried to lie his way out. But the mountain of evidence, the videos, the eyewitnesses, the security footage, painted a damning picture. When the officers led Garrett away for further questioning, Michelle let out a slow breath. She felt Barack's hand find hers, steady and warm. Are you okay? He asked softly. She nodded. But her voice was firm. Not yet. But I will be. As they stepped outside, into the cool night air, the flashes of cameras and the hum of voices followed them. Michelle squeezed Barack's hand, drawing strength from him. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But neither was she. There was no mistaking the edge in Barack's tone. We're not going anywhere until this is handled properly. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, reverberating through the silent luxury boutique. Michelle watched as the officers moved back toward the store. Garrett's eyes darted around wildly, searching for an escape, his face pale with dread. He shot one last desperate glance in her direction, a silent plea for mercy. But Michelle looked away. She wasn't interested in his excuses or his regret. Instead, she turned to Barack. What happens now? She asked. Barack didn't hesitate. Now, he said, his voice steady, unshakable. Now, we make sure the truth comes out. The story explodes. By the next morning, the incident at Eternal Lux had gone viral. Video footage of Garrett's aggressive behavior, his mocking tone, and Michelle's calm defiance had been shared hundreds of thousands of times across social media. Commentators, activists, and ordinary people dissected every moment of the footage. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, hashtags like #JusticeForMichelle and #NotInvisible began trending worldwide. Michelle woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, notifications. Support poured in from friends, colleagues, and even complete strangers who saw themselves in her experience. But there were critics too. People accusing her of exaggerating, of exploiting her status. Barack walked in, placing a steaming cup of coffee on her nightstand. "You don't have to read it," he said, his voice gentle. "I know," Michelle sighed, but her eyes remained on the screen, scrolling through the endless sea of comments. She wasn't looking for validation. She knew what had happened. What she needed to understand was why this moment resonated so deeply with the world. And then, it hit her. The incident at Eternal Lux wasn't just about her. It was about every black woman who had ever been followed in a store. About every person who had been asked to prove they could afford something. About every moment of quiet, everyday discrimination that people had endured in silence. She read message after message. "I was kicked out of a store last year because they didn't believe I could afford a dress for my daughter's wedding. Thank you for speaking up. I've been profiled in luxury stores more times than I can count. I'm glad someone finally stood their ground. You don't deserve sympathy just because you're famous. People go through worse every day." The last comment stung. Not because she disagreed, but because she knew it was true. Millions of people faced this treatment. The only difference? This time, the world was paying attention. The fight for justice. Later that day, Michelle and Barack met with their lawyer, preparing their formal statements for the investigation. Michelle insisted on being there when the security footage was reviewed. She needed to see it with her own eyes. The footage was damning. It showed Garrett's condescension escalating into outright hostility. It showed his attempt to intimidate her. And worst of all, it captured the exact moment he grabbed her wrist. Michelle didn't flinch as she watched, but her stomach twisted. Garrett's lawyer tried to defend him. He acted out of concern for the merchandise, he argued. But even the officers weren't buying it. The evidence spoke for itself. "Mrs. Obama," one of the detectives said, "will be filing charges for assault and unlawful discrimination. We'll also be notifying the state licensing board to investigate his professional conduct." Michelle nodded, but she felt a hollowness inside her chest. She wanted justice. But she also wanted answers. Answers that Garrett Harrison couldn't give. The aftermath. A week later, Garrett Harrison was formally charged. Eternal Lux scrambled to contain the fallout. They issued a public statement condemning Garrett's actions. They announced mandatory diversity training for all staff. But the damage was already done. Protests erupted outside the store. Signs reading "We Belong" and "No More Silence" filled the streets. And then, Michelle was invited to speak at one of the rallies. At first, she hesitated. She had never wanted to be at the center of this storm. But now, she had no choice. She couldn't stay silent. The speech that changed everything. Standing before thousands of people, Michelle took a deep breath. She scanned the faces in the crowd, young and old, black and white, all holding signs, chanting, demanding change. She raised her hand. The roar of the crowd fell silent. "This isn't just about me." Her voice rang out strong. "It's about every person who has ever felt invisible, who has been told they don't belong, who has been judged by their appearance instead of their character." The crowd erupted in agreement. But we can't let moments like this pass without action. We have to demand change. We have to hold people accountable. And we have to make sure that no one else feels the way I did that night. From the sidelines, Barack watched her with pride. She wasn't just his wife. She was a force of nature. She had turned pain into power. The movement continues. In the weeks that followed, Michelle and Barack worked with civil rights organizations to push for new laws against discrimination in retail spaces. Eternal Lux faced a nationwide boycott. Former employees came forward, revealing a toxic culture of discrimination inside the company. Under mounting pressure, the CEO of Eternal Lux issued a public apology and implemented sweeping reforms. But for Michelle, the fight wasn't over. Because policies can change, but attitudes take longer. Late one night, as she reviewed legislation proposals, Barack walked into her office. "Still at it?" he asked, smiling. "I can't stop now," Michelle replied. Barack leaned down, kissing her forehead. "I didn't expect you to." The final verdict. Months later, Garrett Harrison stood in court. The judge ruled against him. He was fined, sentenced to mandatory community service, and ordered to complete anti-bias training. Outside the courthouse, Garrett approached Michelle. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Michelle steadied him. "I hope you mean that." Then she turned and walked away. Because this fight was just getting started.